G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 24th of February 2026. I'm your host, the Elder David Applegate, as the war rages on. The war of words, of course, in most people's eyes, I think right now, don't care. But Europe, of course, the establishment and the left are all, oh, he's our hero. But more and more people are either checking out or believing that he is just another Ukrainian failed politician, a wannabe dictator. Though technically he is right now, but he's not a legal dictator. He's just using the law to stay in power, because Ukrainians wrote a bunch of laws without putting them to the test after they cobbled together a constitution based on other constitutions without really thinking. Right, but again, of course, today the Russians have hammered over the last 36 hours, because some stories do linger, right, weren't reported on yesterday, even though they occurred in the last. So there are delays in some of these stories, particularly with Ukraine not reporting. Remember, this site is put together by volunteers. I do not blame them. They can only work with the material they are given. But Mykolaiv, Kryvyi, and Dnipro, you know what, and of course Kharkiv and Odessa, like basically, and Kiev, right? All we needed was Lviv, and it'd be pretty much all the places that should be destroyed absolutely by now. But remember, Russia is only carrying out precision strikes. They're not carpet bombing, right? They're not dropping 10 bombs. They're lucky to drop 2 bombs or 1 missile. Like, they'll send 30, knowing some will be shot down, right? And some of them are programmed and designed to be shot down. How many times do I have to do this? I'm going to find, eventually, this one video I saw of a Russian cruise missile. It was, I think, 2023. It literally, like, slower than a plane. Like, you couldn't believe that this Russian cruise missile. It's like, I've seen faster lawnmowers, right? But then every so often it'll go flash, like there's some sort of flash or distortion around it. No, suddenly realize that's screaming, right? That is detecting and pulsing from radar, right? It's loitering. It's looking for a target. It's looking for Ukrainian air defenses. The Ukrainian air defense commanders must have been smart and stayed silent and let it pass over, knowing what it was. More likely they still have the European advisors. Now, I think there's been a decrease in the European advisors because we haven't seen, right, that many deaths lately. I think the last was a Finnish officer, although there was allegedly a Danish officer who died in Ukraine as well. But that was a crash, not a combat death, right? But they reported his crash later as occurring in Denmark, even though he was flying from Ukraine. So he flies from Ukraine. No one sees him get on or off the plane. 24 hours later, his death is announced. And everybody starting to suspect that he died in Ukraine in a crash, right? But the Russians claim he was killed in a strike. Now, he could have died of his injuries or crashed as a result of his industry. We'll never know the truth. Okay, this is the problem, right? Europe keeps saying how open and transparent they are. Well, anybody who has to tell you they're open and transparent isn't. Flat out, right? The Biden administration, we're the safest and safest ever. Right, so we know Russia's lashed out at Russia, pinprick attacks here and there. The cursed bridge still stands. There was a terrorist attack in Moscow attributed to the Ukraine war. Again, there was a dead policeman and some dead Ukrainians. I mean, alleged Ukrainians. So pretty much like in most wars, most spies are going to die. Now, the offensive towards Lyman is slow and has ground to a halt. Now, they talk about the frozen front. Yes, there are parts of here, particularly here in the middle, that are frozen. Right. There are only occasional, what you call machine gun banter. Right. I fire, you fire. We clear our barrels. We notch up our belt and say, right, you know, yeah. And, I go make some borscht and call it a day. Whoa, we just had we just had a new strike, right? The Russians have just opened up on the front. A series of strikes have struck the central Ukraine, central battlefront here. Just appeared, wham, kablammy. I thought first it was here a short time ago, before I started recording. Then here, right now, literally 9 minutes ago and this was earlier on. So Russia is actively striking Ukraine almost on the hour, right? And every hour. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot more overnight and a lot more during so we are seeing heavy activity, which is normal, right? Russia just says, right, midweek started, pound, right? Because there's base, right? Ukraine has more bases than the rest of Europe, if we exclude American bases, all right? But yeah, Ukraine has more bases than Eastern Europe. Most countries in Europe don't have this many military bases. And don't say it's about the war, because Ukraine built these 6 years before the war, right? Ukraine was preparing for war with Russia, right? Russia constantly asked them, what are you doing? You're preparing for war against us, aren't you? No! And then in 2022, yes! And Russia puts troops on its border, and Zelensky says, oh, they won't attack, they're cowards! Yeah. You know, this is what I don't know why people just cannot comprehend Zelensky's the bad guy, right? I guess it's because they need a Saturday morning cartoon, so if one guy's bad, the other guy has to be good, right? No! Everybody can be bad in a war, right? War is not the gentleman's pursuit of chess, you know. It is. It's not boxing, right? Even boxing is a gentleman's sport. It's not a gentleman's sport. It's a sport, not a sport. It's a thug match, and the biggest thug wins, right? The one who can take the most damage without dying. Now, it's interesting that Russia has renewed attacks simultaneously, so I don't know if this is probing or preparing, but there's no front, any other activity on the front, so it could be just Ukraine is concentrating troops, and Russia reminding that they can see and hear everything that goes on in Ukraine. So, again, on the front, very little activity, but where there is activity, there has been advances by the Russians, right? Rodinsk is almost gone. They're on the outskirts of Brinsk again. They're on the outskirts of Hrishny. They're on the overrun all what's left of Unishki. Yeah. They moved up a little bit here. The military base on the outskirts of Unishki has been overrun. Now, the Ukrainians are holding out at Porishki. Here they're holding out quite fine. You know, there's only sporadic street battles, and when Ukraine you go to lunch and you come back in your bunkers occupied by Russians. Who are you? Oh, you're Ukrainian, pop. So yeah, they're settled in for the winter, I think, and slowed to a grind. So yes, parts of the front are frozen, literally frozen. Looks like there's no Russian invasion of Ivnica. They didn't cross the river, right? Ukrainians had them allegedly crossing the river, but looking at the media, this is just a line, right? They put a point here and a point here, and a line was drawn here, but really, Russians have not crossed the river here or here. They've actually not crossed the river, right? They have crossed the river on this side, but not this side of the river. So this here is crossed, but not this one. So this here, no. Or this, no. Everything this side of the river. So, although allegedly they're on the outskirts of right. So this here, right, I don't know why it's not filled in. There are no Ukrainians, no Russians. Maybe that's why. But they do control here. Now, they have crossed the river here and have pushed all the way here before being pushed back. But it just seems to be they're controlling the river crossing here, not going far. As we come down here, they haven't taken any other crossings or moved further up. But they were and pushed back here. But they're now back, right? But there's no... They're waiting to see if the Ukrainians cross from here, where the Ukrainians come. Well, but they're hoping to draw the Ukrainians down to here, of course, and then just come through behind them and seal them off, or push them out this way, right? And again, the targets, as I said, right? We zoom out, right? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is almost gone. This is still intact. This is almost gone. This is almost gone. So there's one. So there's only this line here. So, oops. Damn it. Clicked the wrong spot. Right. So here they've bombed Russian aviation airstrikes. This is all these Russian aviation airstrikes. They've, as you can see, they've pounded them. This is the footage yesterday of the Su-25s. Some of it is up to a week old, right? They've been pounding this area, right? This is second largest concentration of Ukrainian troops outside of Kiev, right? And third one, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4 major concentrations. You got the line here, the line across here, and the line across here. All right, and then you got the sporadic line through here. If the Russians really wanted to, they could break through here and come round behind the Ukrainians. But that an army logistics of that size would cost, just alone, an estimated 30% of the Russian economy on top of their ready. So that would take them to 50% of their economy. And right now they're only geared to 20% of their, right? The majority of the military spending is on. The majority of the military spending is on the war. The overall military spending of Russia is about 20% of their economy, right? So if they were to open up, right, more troops and go on a full offensive anywhere, that would dramatically increase the cost of the war and increase their debt. Now, here's the thing. Ukraine, however, is spending between a third just on artillery. Overall, the war is costing them half of their economy, right? On top of the fact they get another 100 billion, right? So they spend more, right? Europe and Ukraine spend more on the war than Ukraine's economy is worth, right? Ukraine is spending more than Russia, has more troops on the Ukrainian battlefield than Russia has in Ukraine. And on top of that, they have over 600,000 volunteers they could draw from, plus their reserves of 1.2 million, So Russia has the tactical advantage of less combat troops, economic efficiency, air superiority, which they won't challenge the Ukraine's, for obvious reasons. Ukraine has the right. You have the advantage, right? If you're fighting over, same, right? 1 or 2 missiles aren't the problem. It's when there's 4, 5, and 6 more, right? You create a boxing effect, right? Where either you go left or you go right, but you can't dodge, right? You got the 1, 2, right? So you dodge the first one, but then the second follow-up, right? So you cross there, and then bam, right? You set them up for a 1, 2. Because if they don't dodge, they get hit twice. If they dodge, they get hit by the second impact, which are wound up. The first one's just to get them to dodge. So you have a whole 1, 2 going on right there. As you can see, the Russians are piling it on. And you'll hear Zelensky and more tomorrow on this. And Zelensky crying right now. Right. He's already crying about earlier attacks from, we don't know, but that's an industrial site that went up in smoke. Russia's not just hitting, they are hitting police stations and oil depots and, what do you call it? Ammunition dumps. But German French, her Merkel 2.0 said that Ukraine is more effective than is often made out to be. And, well, wait a minute. If Ukraine is... What do you mean territorial gains? It's Russia who's made territorial gains. And the Russian economy... So if he claims Ukraine has gained territory, right? We look at the map. No, they haven't. Right? This is Ukraine's own map is telling us they have lost territory. You've got to ask yourself, is he projecting? Is he on drugs? Is he absolutely lost the plot? And then you've got to realize that the majority of people out there do not see this map, that millions or even tens of thousands aren't watching my video. So the vast majority out there are lied to, are believing the lies, and won't verify or fact check the lies and look at alternative sources of information. So it's basically cope and seethe, right? And we look at the Al Jazeera map, which is actually draw a copy of the British map, right? They're marking areas, claiming significant fighting. Yes, there is some areas where there is significant fighting, and you can see the map, right? They're actually showing you that Russia actually has more territory and is fighting in more territory than this map. So you're going to ask yourself, why don't I use this map? Because these maps are rarely apply, right? These maps are rarely updated. And believe it or not, this is the Russian map that they're using. So the UK media is using the Russian map to fearmonger, saying, oh, look, Russia's taken more territory than you'd have you believe. But then they turn around and tell the people, Ukraine's taken more territory than they would have you believe. And it's like, did you make a mistake? Now, South Korea... Russian embassy in South Korea put up a sign that victory will be ours after a speech from the... as you know, there was a soft coup in South Korea, removing the president under the pretext of national emergency, right? All the left-wing parties got together and locked arms with the moderates and convinced them to toss out the previous president on cooked up charges, which they now admit they cooked, right? They cooked them up. They never had, right? The whole South Korean president was removed on a lie, And now they don't know what to do because the left are pushing to have him executed. So they want to execute the former South Korean president based on a lie, right? Because they lied to him to get him to respond to a threat, right? That he did not know did not exist. He was deceived, right? But Slovakia, it's cut off because of the cut off of oil, cut off power to Ukraine. I think that was announced yesterday. When asked to turn it back on, he said, no, won't do it. But it's not the only one. Ukraine is now in real trouble. They want to deal with Hungary, yeah. But Putin is... Now, Putin, 2 months ago, called the European leaders little pigs. Apparently this video resurfaced, right? Released as an official English translated video of the whole thing was released sometime today on Russian Telegram in English. Obviously, they're sending a message to the West, right? And in it, Putin says he's not afraid of the UK. They can't even protect their borders from little rubber boats. He called them rubber dinghies, actually. And he said the Europeans were little pigs, and that Russia will achieve its goals in Ukraine either by diplomacy or by force. But they cut it off and saying, it's up to you, right? He put out the speech again in full. The Guardian is always lying, of course, but usually they lie by omission. They leave stuff out. Now, the Su-25 is slowly being replaced by the Su-35. Now, the Su-35 is not a young aircraft. But however, it's not an update of the Su-25. It's an update of the Su-27. Now, this was actually the rollout of... It was originally the Su-27M. And here is the... where was it? Japan, when there was... I forget when it was. There was a sort of bounty put on the new aircraft. One flew to Japan. It was put in a hangar. It was photographed briefly to prove that it was in, and the Russians made a stink. Some had high-level talks, and they flew it back to Russia. So yes, it's property of Russia. But since then, it's been at air shows, performed aerial maneuvers. It's one of the few planes that can fly at a high angle of attack, enabling it not just to look up and shoot down, but it can also look down. Right? It's primarily a high-level interceptor. It flies above the enemy and shoots it down from above. Right? But it's one of the highest flying aircraft in the world. It's also one of the most maneuverable aircraft in the world. Built to take on, as you can see, it's built to take on the F-16. Now it has the 30mm cannon. Started life as the Su-27M. Now, over time, it has been given canards, given you tail design, given you wing mounts. As you can see, it's got it's got the infrared, and the outer missile is the smaller short-range radar. And of course, it's got the big long-range underneath. It is loaded up for bear, right? It's got the dummy pods on the two ring racks, but those could be loaded up to 3 AAs as well. Aircraft missiles, right? Now, it has a sophisticated radar array, which at the time, Russia was thought not capable of achieving, right? Digital radar array, right? As well as you see, flight canards. It uses exhaust maneuvering for tighter turns. Here, again, it has look-down capability, which means it can literally see down. So not only can it air intercept, it is also, basically perform pretty much what the F-16s are doing right now in Ukraine, and that is anti-missile operations using look-down capabilities. Now, Su-37, again, as I said, is the upgraded version of the... So you Su-35, from the Su-27 to the Su-27M, Su-25S, and now, into the future, is the Su-37, which is still in combat trials. But they are flying a variant with Indian Air Force. They are, but predominantly, I think I've reached the end anyway. We get to an ad. We don't care. Right? Basically, skies over Ukraine have rarely seen the Su-35 or the Su-37, and they are working on the Su-37. Now, as I understand it, the Su-25 is being replaced slowly by the Su-35M, which is an upgraded version of the Su-25, which is weird because the Su-35S, which is an slightly older aircraft than the Big 31. So Su-35 is not entirely new, but it's been around for a while. But it's upgrades as well to the Su-37. So it's going to be weird. So you're going to have these current Su-35s. I think it's all part of how Russia's staging, right? They keep their aircraft flying, right? So when they get a new group of pilots, they might go into an Su-35. Rarely will they upgrade, right? They get more. The idea is to have more skill than the other side, right? That Russia will not rely solely on technology, because again, there's superiority in numbers, and there's also just a lot of warfare as deception. If you think it looks like an old aircraft, you might mistake its technology as old and not realize that it's using advanced attack missiles and can hit you at long range with low visibility. They may look small, but they're actually low visibility, and you might not see them on radar. That's why these are so dangerous. It's because they use altitude, so they literally drop the missile on you before it fires. And as far as I understand, a lot of objects that vertically drop don't get filtered out of radar. So that's an artificial blind spot. Right, but if they didn't have radar filtering, you could get all sorts of objects, all sorts of birds. But it's so small, it can actually appear to be a bird. Now, moving on from weaponry, right, the biggest threat to Ukraine right now is not the Russians. It's Ukraine's spending. The Ukrainian economy is on the verge of collapse. Now, yes, the financial crisis in Ukraine started months ago as Ukraine's economy became more and more dependent on the West because Russia started destroying more and more of their economy. Now, we don't know how much Hungary has cut them off, but Hungary has cut them off. But the biggest problem is debt, right? The GDP ratios, that 99%, that's bankruptcy, right? 99% of your spending, right? The public debt, it's 99% of your economy. Boom, you're bankrupt, man. You ain't got $1 to your name. Literally, you make $100 and you got $1 to your name, right? So all government spending is debt. No, so-called military loan of $19 billion is just tipping it over the edge, right? Their refinancing program is now, they cut the payments to $8 billion, which means Ukraine's going to be in debt for the next 100 years. Or 112, actually, I believe it was calculated at. And that was before this loan. Now, there's the deadline, right? And financial assistance and earmark loans, but Ukraine is effed beyond fathomable. Right? Zelensky has run Ukraine into the ground, literally. Right? His pride, the military sycophants that he's surrounding himself with, the yes man, they're all... And what are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to export Ukrainian culture, right? There's their... Right? Ukrainian TV, Europe TV and all this. And Russia's doing the same too, you know. So don't think that... I know Russia's economy, however, grew by 0.8%. Ukraine's debts grew by more than that, right? Ukraine has gone to 99% in debt. That is like... that's not your economy growing, bro. That's your economy sinking, right? That's their newspeak way of saying, oh, look, our economy, our GDP is down. No, instead they say the debt's risen, right? It's the same thing. Your GDP is down. Right, but Slovakia, right, was getting 15% of its oil from Ukraine, and now they've cut them off, right? Ukraine cut them off. They cut off their own revenue because they cut off the Russians, because the rest of the oil came from Russia, and the transit oil, right, through the Druzhna pipeline, which was closed in February this year. And Slovakia has called an emergency meeting of the EU saying, hey, this would be an act of war if it was anyone else. Will someone please, will you please get rid of us, of this pesky dictator? I mean, alleged dictator. But Slovakia has retaliated not just with halting electricity. They have halted financial support as well. But the amount is very little. It's insignificant. But what they've really done, as Hungary, of course, vetoed the loan for Ukraine, Budapest has doubled down, accused Kiev of oil blockading and blackmail. It's not just that, they've now suspended diesel exports. So when it was just the TASS reported on, when they reported this is a little older, it was just, asking for Europe to step in, and they cut off electricity until the pipelines turn back on and is safe and secure, right? Because when you turn off a pipeline, it could get bubbles, gas bubbles. There could be someone stealing oil. You never know what's happening, right? You can't just turn these things back on. Valves could stick. There could be a breach, right? They've literally turned off the power right? So Ukraine turned off the power to the pipeline, so they don't know what's happening with it. So the remote sensors aren't working, so they've got to have inspectors go in, and they don't trust Ukraine. So they've asked for help, and obviously there's been some bullshit that's happened. So they've further retaliated by cutting off diesel. And as you know, what does diesel? Trucks and tanks, right? Two things Ukraine does not need to run out of power right now. Zelensky, of course, has rejected territorial concessions to Russia, so the peace talks next week are mute. He's look at him. Yeah, you can't make me. You can't make me. I'm a big man child, right? Laughs off the accusations of dictatorship, and he's also laughing that Trump can't really do anything to him right now because he's a protected little, he's protected, but he's a, as Putin says, it's who gets the last laugh, right? And he starts laughing. He plans on having the last laugh. Okay, so again, We don't know what. Look, Putin doesn't always kill you, okay? He can hurt people in many ways, right? Economically, politically, socially. We don't know how he's going to take it out on Zelensky. We know for now the Chechens are working with the Swiss of all people to bring about an end to the Ukraine war. So, take the power away from Zelensky. Start getting him socially and economically isolated. Then you cut out his heart. Right? Make him suffer first. Make him fret. Make him sweat. But right now he does not take the Chechen threat very seriously, nor Trump's calling him a dictator very seriously. Right? The last thing you don't want to do is not take Trump seriously. Otherwise you end up in a pretty good place. Those who know. Those who don't care. So, Ukraine's violated multiple treaties with Russia. Russia says this problem must be resolved. Finland, however, has put together a solution. Easy. NATO return to 1997 borders and declare neutrality in Ukraine. What an amazing development. But of course, it will never happen. But it's nice that there are actually to know that there are some sensible people still left in Finland and not, what would you call them? Sycophants. Yes, sycophants to the EU. Now, of course, as the war of words continue, let's just see if there's any war. Well, there are many more markers on the map. Russia is pounding. Well, not there, but yeah, pounding Ukraine right now. And I have zero sympathy. But I'm not on either side. I remind you that I'm not on either side of the conflict. I do not have a stake in the game. I'm not betting on Russia. I'm not betting on Ukraine. I know people are betting on the outcome of this war. And the Guardian and the Independent, who isn't independent, by the way. How can you call yourself independent when you're taking a side, right? They are urging people to do everything they can to stop Russia. Well, 2 years ago, all these people who put the little Ukraine flag on their chest and ran around marching in Europe, if you'd done it on the Russian front, you might have actually made a difference. But you didn't. You're cowards, right? And European cowardice is costing lives. Now it's European pride that is costing lives. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.